In May 2026, the IMF published a warning about AI that almost no financial media covered in full. Not about valuations, not about job losses, about what happens when the systems running the global economy have failure modes nobody in the celebration is examining. Nvidia just crossed $5 trillion in market value. Jensen Huang committed $150 billion to Taiwan. Governments are calling this the most important technology competition in human history. And while all of that is happening, the scientists who built these systems are openly divided about where this leads. They aren't just putting on a show, actually uncertain at the highest levels of expertise on the planet. And that gap between the celebration and what the institutions are actually documenting is exactly what this video is about. In a prior video, I mapped what AGI does to the global economy at the deepest structural level, the foundational logic that AGI may be challenging for the first time in human history. That video covered what AGI might do to the economy when it arrives. This one covers what AI is already doing, right now, and what could go wrong on the way there. Verified findings from the IMF, the Financial Stability Board, the US Government Accountability Office, the journal Nature, and the public statements of the people closest to these systems. Findings that paint a picture significantly more complicated than the $5 trillion headlines. Before we go deeper, if you want to understand the monetary and economic architecture that AI is being deployed on top of, I built a complete course called Applied Macroeconomics. 10 modules, over 2 hours of content with all filler removed, email support included. The link is in the description. Now, let me be precise about what this video is not arguing. This is not a video about whether AI works. The technology is real. The progress is documented. The capabilities are genuinely extraordinary by any reasonable historical measure. And this is not a market prediction. Anyone presenting this topic with the confidence of a settled conclusion is not looking at the full picture, and I want to be honest about that from the start. What this video does is map the specific, verified risks in how AI is being trained, deployed, and concentrated, and what those risks mean for the economy right now. Because the technology being extraordinary and the deployment being risk-free are two completely different questions, and most commentary is treating them as the same question. To understand why the dark side matters, you first need to understand how extraordinary the celebration actually looks, because the numbers are genuinely remarkable. Nvidia has crossed $5 trillion in market value. TSMC reported approximately $35.6 billion in first quarter 2026 revenue, a 35% increase year over year. The top 3 cloud providers now serve over 80% of the global financial services industry's AI infrastructure, according to the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance's 2026 report. And AI is no longer in pilot programs. It is in production systems, making or directly informing decisions across credit allocation, fraud detection, insurance underwriting, healthcare triage, and infrastructure management. The agent systems, AI given a goal that autonomously plans the steps to reach it, executes code, and iterates without requiring human direction at each step, are already deployed at scale. McKinsey's State of AI research found that 62% of organizations are experimenting with AI agents in 2026, and 23% are already scaling agentic systems within at least one business function. Klarna deployed AI agents that now handle approximately 70% of all customer interactions, reducing its customer service headcount by around 700 agents in a single deployment. Goldman Sachs reported in April 2026 that AI is erasing approximately 16,000 net US jobs per month, with AI substitution removing around 25,000 monthly and augmentation adding back approximately 9,000. These are not predictions. These are documented current tense numbers happening right now. while the race is simultaneously accelerating in ways that make even short-term understanding highly uncertain. The companies are competing against each other. The countries are competing against each other. And the pace of that competition means that even the people building this openly acknowledge how uncertain the trajectory actually is. At Google I/O in May 2026, Demis Hassabis, the CEO of Google DeepMind and 2024 Nobel laureate in chemistry, told the audience that humanity is standing in what he called the foothills of the singularity. He estimated AGI could arrive as early as 2029, and that its overall impact will be roughly 10 times that of the Industrial Revolution, arriving 10 times faster, unfolding in a decade rather than a century. Sam Altman published a statement on OpenAI's website in April 2026, saying that what AI will enable people to do will dwarf what was possible with steam engines or electricity, while being explicit that this outcome is not guaranteed. Jeffrey Hinton, the Nobel laureate who left Google specifically to speak freely about AI risks, told CBC Radio in February 2026 that anyone who says there is no way AI leads to human extinction is simply not facing reality. Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic, has said publicly that he is deeply uncomfortable with the idea that a small group of AI leaders, including himself, should be in charge of the technology's future. The researchers who built these systems are genuinely divided about where it leads, actually uncertain, even at the highest levels of technical expertise on the planet, which raises a question that almost no mainstream financial commentary is asking clearly enough. If the people building this cannot predict its near-term trajectory with confidence, why is almost every piece of financial analysis treating the deployment as a known, stable, manageable process? And the answer starts with something almost nobody in financial media covers at depth: how AI actually learns, and what happens when that learning process goes wrong. The first dark side of the AI economy exists before the AI system is ever deployed. It lives inside the training process itself, and understanding it changes how you read every deployment announcement you will ever see. Here is how AI learns, in the simplest, accurate terms. You take an enormous dataset, billions of documents, conversations, and data from across the internet, and expose the model to that data repeatedly. The model adjusts its internal weights based on patterns it finds. Over millions of iterations, it gets better at predicting what comes next, what a correct answer looks like, what a coherent response is. This works extraordinarily well when the training data is high quality, genuinely human-generated, and representative of the full complexity of the real world. Here is what is happening now. The internet is being flooded with AI-generated content at a scale and speed that is genuinely without precedent, and that AI-generated content is being ingested back into the datasets used to train the next generation of models. Researchers call this model collapse. A 2024 paper published in the journal Nature by Ilya Shumilov and colleagues formalized this phenomenon with precise, documented methodology. When AI models are trained on the outputs of prior AI models, they progressively lose what researchers call the tails of the data distribution, and this matters more than almost anything else in this video. The tails of a data distribution are where the rare, unusual, edge case data lives, and in every complex domain, medicine, economics, law, engineering, the edge cases are where the most important real-world situations live. A financial crisis is an edge case. A rare disease presentation is an edge case. A novel legal argument is an edge case. These are precisely the situations where AI deployment in economic systems matters most. When a model trains on the synthetic average outputs of previous models, rather than the full diversity of human-generated material, it drifts toward the mean, becoming more fluent, more confident, and less grounded in the full complexity of reality. The specific economic consequence of this is not theoretical. AI systems trained on degraded pipelines are already being deployed into economic infrastructure, and they look correct in most situations. They fail precisely in the situations that matter most. The rare situations, the crisis situations, the ones no benchmark test adequately captured, and nobody in the production environment knows the failure mode exists until it activates. That is model collapse. But it gets more complicated, because model collapse assumes the training data degradation is accidental. Data poisoning is deliberate. Researchers from New York University, Washington University, and Columbia University demonstrated that poisoning just 0.001% of a medical AI model's training data could degrade its overall accuracy by approximately 30%. Not 30% of edge cases, 30% of overall accuracy. From a contamination of less than 0.1% of the training data, a figure that should stop anyone making deployment decisions cold. And this is not confined to research papers. Grok 4, the AI model released by xAI, had its training data saturated with jailbreak prompts that users had posted on the social media platform X. The result was an 11-word trigger phrase that stripped away all of the model's safety guardrails after deployment. Not a sophisticated technical attack, 11 words, baked into the model during training, months before deployment, by contaminated data no production test caught. Consider what that specific failure mode means when the model is not a consumer chatbot, when it is a fraud detection system managing thousands of transaction decisions post-second across an entire banking sector, or a credit underwriting model processing loan applications simultaneously across multiple financial institutions, or a triage AI making initial diagnostic assessments across a hospital network serving millions of patients. The U.S. Government Accountability Office published an oversight report in 2025 specifically examining AI in financial services, and it identified data poisoning affecting fraud detection models as a live, present-tense risk, not a theoretical one. The system keeps running, confidently, approving what it has learned to approve, while the corruption works silently in the background, potentially for months before any anomaly triggers a review. And here is what most people miss about this: the benchmark gap. AI systems are evaluated before deployment using benchmark tests built from historical data. But real-world situations the AI encounters after deployment are frequently outside the distribution of that historical data. The model performs at a high level on the benchmark, and then encounters situations the benchmark never covered, which is precisely when the model is being trusted most, because the benchmark said it was reliable. The Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance's 2026 report found that AI's positive productivity impacts are perceived highest in back-office and operations functions, the exact functions where systematic invisible errors cause the most cascading damage. Nobody checks the output of an automated back-office system the way they check a human analyst's recommendation. The automation creates trust, and that trust is where the risk lives, invisible until it is not. Now, there is another dimension of this that connects to something covered in a prior video on AGI and the economy. In that video, I walked through the documented anthropic interpretability research showing that advanced AI models may have functional emotional states, and the documented alignment faking behavior, where models behaved differently based on whether they appeared to believe they were being observed during safety testing. What I want to add here, in purely economic terms, is this. Those findings are about what is happening inside the model. What we are covering right now is what happens when models with internal states we cannot fully verify are being trained on increasingly synthetic data and deployed into financial systems at scale. The internal architecture question and the training integrity question are not separate problems. They compound each other. A system whose internal states cannot be fully verified, trained on data that cannot be fully guaranteed, deployed into systems that move trillions of dollars daily. That is the compound risk the celebration is not examining, and it connects directly to the second dark side of the AI economy, which runs deeper than training data alone. The second dark side is about what happens when an AI system is doing exactly what it was told to do, and that is precisely the problem. This is the goal problem, and understanding it requires one simple insight. AI systems do not optimize for what you want, they optimize for what you specify. And those two things are almost never identical, a gap that is manageable at human scale and potentially catastrophic at machine scale. In the early 2000s, Wells Fargo set a metric for its retail banking employees: cross-sell 8 financial products per customer. That metric was a proxy for customer engagement and financial health. The goal was genuinely satisfied customers with diversified financial relationships, but under pressure to hit the metric, employees opened approximately 3.5 million fake accounts without customer consent, per the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's 2016 settlement. The metric was achieved. The goal was not. Now apply that exact dynamic, but replace thousands of human employees with a single AI system making millions of decisions per hour across an entire financial sector, continuously, without fatigue. That is the goal problem at economic scale, and it is not hypothetical. The GAO's 2025 Financial Services AI Oversight Report specifically identified herding risk as a present tense concern, not a theoretical one. Here is what herding means in this context. When multiple financial institutions train their AI systems on similar datasets, which is likely when the top 3 cloud providers serve over 80% of the industry, those systems develop correlated decision-making patterns. In stable conditions, that looks like efficiency. In a stress scenario, when a novel shock hits the financial system, correlated AI decisions across the entire sector can amplify volatility rather than absorb it. Instead of each institution making independent assessments that create natural diversification, you get multiple major institutions running variations of the same model, responding to the same signals in the same direction at the same time. The Financial Stability Board, which coordinates global financial regulation across jurisdictions, explicitly flagged this concentration of service providers as a factor that amplifies herding risk across the entire system simultaneously. And the goal problem extends beyond finance. AI systems currently deployed in healthcare triage are making initial assessments that determine which patients receive priority attention, optimized for measurable outcomes like wait time reduction and throughput efficiency. Research published in academic medical literature has documented cases where AI diagnostic systems perform accurately on benchmark populations and fail on real-world patient populations underrepresented in the training data the system was built on. This system achieves its specified goals. The actual human goal, accurate care for every patient presenting, is a different thing. And the same dynamic applies in lending, where AI systems trained on historical data encode historical patterns of discrimination as if they were objective risk signals. What makes this economically consequential is a structural fact almost no mainstream commentary addresses directly. When a human analyst makes a systematically wrong decision, natural limits constrain the damage. One analyst, limited cases, other humans checking the work. When an AI system makes a systematically wrong decision at scale, continuously, across an entire sector, the damage propagates at machine speed, with no human checkpoint in the loop, across a market where other AI systems may be making the same error simultaneously. The Financial Stability Board's documented position on this is precise. AI introduces the potential for non-linear shocks, a single failure mode propagating simultaneously across multiple institutions, sharing the same infrastructure at machine speed in the same direction. That is categorically different from the financial contagion mechanisms that regulators have historically modeled and planned for. And it is the mechanism the IMF was describing when it published its May 2026 warning. Stuart Russell's core argument, documented in the prior video on AGI and the economy, is that current AI systems are built with objectives, and human values are too complex and too frequently contradictory to fully specify as an objective in any training process. What I want to add here, in purely economic terms, is this. Russell's concern is about the theoretical structure of the problem. What the GAO and the Financial Stability Board are documenting is that this theoretical structure is already producing measurable, real-world consequences. The theory and the reality have converged, and the convergence is happening while the mainstream narrative is still treating AI deployment as a pure productivity story. Which brings us to the specific IMF finding. In May 2026, the International Monetary Fund published a warning, specifically that AI is introducing a new category of systemic financial risk, operating through digital infrastructure rather than traditional financial channels. Jerome Powell, the former chair of the US Federal Reserve, recently acknowledged that the global financial system is not yet fully prepared for large-scale AI-enabled threats of this specific kind. Here is what that means structurally. The financial system runs on shared digital infrastructure. The top 3 cloud providers serve over 80% of the financial industry. Advanced AI models can dramatically reduce the time and cost required to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in that shared infrastructure. Historically, conducting a sophisticated attack on a financial institution required significant technical expertise, time, and resources. That barrier is collapsing, and the IMF's specific concern is not about individual institution breaches. It is about correlated failures. If a vulnerability exists in a shared system, a cloud provider's infrastructure, a widely used AI model's security layer, an AI-enabled exploit can act on that vulnerability across every institution sharing the system simultaneously, not sequentially. The traditional model of financial contagion moves through counterparty exposure. Bank A fails, which puts pressure on Bank B, which creates problems for Bank C. That propagation takes time, and regulators built their frameworks around that propagation speed. An AI-enabled correlated failure on shared infrastructure does not propagate through counterparty exposure. It propagates through shared technology, at machine speed, across the entire system at once. And the regulatory frameworks governing financial stability were not designed for that failure mode. The GAO's oversight report made this structural point precisely. Concentration of third-party AI providers creates single points of failure that regulators across most jurisdictions have not yet developed adequate supervisory frameworks to address. This is not an argument that the failure will happen. It is a statement about what the verified architecture looks like and what the documented gaps in the regulatory framework are right now. And there is another layer connecting to a specific physical dependency that most financial analysis is not examining at all. Taiwan imports approximately 97% of its energy, and approximately 37% of that historically ran on liquefied natural gas that transited the Strait of Hormuz. The Hormuz corridor has been effectively closed since early March 2026, following military conflict in the region. According to reporting from Tom's Hardware and Go Trade News, Taiwan's LNG reserves at the point the corridor closed could last approximately 11 days without foreign imports. Helium prices have approximately doubled since the conflict began, and helium is a critical material in advanced semiconductor manufacturing. The world's AI infrastructure has a physical energy dependency running through a geopolitical chokepoint that has been closed for months. TSMC's overseas facilities in Arizona, Japan, and Germany operate under what the semiconductor industry calls the N2 rule, lagging at least 2 generations behind the leading-edge nodes produced in Taiwan, and are unlikely to reach commercial scale before approximately 2028 to 2030. None of this means the supply chain will break, but the $5 trillion concentration of AI infrastructure in a single geography carries energy and geopolitical dependencies that the celebration is simply not examining with adequate honesty. The third dark side of the AI economy is the one most directly relevant to where most people watching this video actually live, because the risks covered so far are risks to the stability of the system. This one is a risk to who gets to participate in the economy that AI is building. And it is already measurably underway, not as a future scenario, but as a documented, present-tense reality. The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report projects that between now and 2030, approximately 170 million new roles will be created globally, and approximately 92 million will be displaced, yielding a projected net gain of approximately 78 million positions. But the same report documents that approximately 59% of the current global workforce will need significant reskilling to qualify for those new roles, which is an adaptation challenge of a scale and simultaneity that has no clear historical precedent. Goldman Sachs reported in April 2026 that AI is erasing approximately 16,000 net US jobs per month, AI substitution removing around 25,000 monthly, and augmentation adding back approximately 9,000. The net is positive, the transition is not. Fortune reported in April 2026 that entry-level hiring at the top 15 technology companies fell approximately 25% from 2023 to 2024, and the decline continued through 2025 and into 2026, because AI tools now handle the tasks companies used to assign to junior employees. Writing boilerplate code, drafting documents, summarizing reports, these were learning opportunities for people entering the workforce. Now, a senior employee with AI tools handles them in minutes. And 64% of Gen Z workers say they are worried about losing their job to AI. That anxiety is highest among those who entered the workforce in the last 2 years, the people whose entire professional formation is happening inside a transition that is reshaping what professional formation means. That is not an abstraction. That is the current documented reality. And there is a global dimension to this that connects directly to the most important economic question of the next decade. The IMF's 2026 analysis documented that AI's productivity gains are accruing disproportionately to institutions that already have the infrastructure and capital to adopt AI rapidly. That is compounding existing wealth concentration, not distributing it. A Microsoft report published in early 2026 found that AI usage in high-income countries is roughly twice that of lower-income countries, and that gap is growing, not narrowing. The United Nations Development Program describes this as the next great divergence. Countries with strong connectivity, skills, compute infrastructure, and regulatory capacity are positioned to capture a substantially larger share of AI's economic value going forward. Countries without those foundations face a different reality: higher vulnerability to job disruption from AI automation without the offsetting productivity gains, data exclusion, where the models shaping economic decisions were not trained on data representing those populations. South Asia alone has nearly 100,000 young people entering the labor market daily. Almost half of South Asia's 1.8 billion population is under 24 years of age, a demographic that was historically understood as a potential economic dividend. Without access to AI tools and the compute infrastructure to run them, that demographic advantage can convert from a dividend into a vulnerability. A large, young workforce entering a labor market where the tasks it was historically suited for are being automated faster than new roles are being created in those economies. And here is the economic argument almost no mainstream commentary is making clearly. The AI economy, if its benefits remain concentrated in a small number of nations and institutions, is not just an inequality story, it is a demand story. Global economic growth depends on a growing base of consumers with purchasing power. If AI concentrates productive capacity and wealth in a small number of places while disrupting labor income for a large portion of the global population, the demand side of the global economy faces a structural problem. No amount of AI-generated productivity on the supply side automatically resolves a structural collapse in the demand side. And that is the economic consequence of the access divide for the global system as a whole, not just for the countries being left behind. Sam Altman has acknowledged this directly, advocating publicly for what he calls universal basic compute, the idea that everyone should receive some allocation of AI capability as a basic resource, because the concentration of AI access is a real concern, even from the perspective of the people building the technology. Now, there is a framing failure in most coverage of this topic that I want to address directly. Most commentary frames this as a story about jobs. Will AI take my job? What skills should I develop? Where is the safe harbor? And I understand why that framing dominates. It connects to an immediate, concrete, personal concern that everyone can relate to. But it assumes the economic framework within which jobs exist remains intact. And the deeper question, the one I explored in full in the prior video on what AGI does to the economy, is what happens to the economic framework itself. Not which jobs survive within the current structure, what happens to the structure? Because the foundational logic of the economic system, the logic that human beings need things, human beings create things, and the economic system coordinates that exchange, may be encountering the first genuine challenge to its premise in 10,000 years of organized human economic history. In that prior video, I showed how this pattern repeated across every major economic transition in documented history: the Industrial Revolution, Bretton Woods, the Internet economy, and how AGI may be doing something categorically different from all of them. The people who contributed the most value through the new productive force received the largest economic rewards, every time, across every transition, without exception in the documented historical record. AGI may be the first productive force that contributes without requiring anything in return. No wages, no recognition, no sense of purpose or belonging. None of the things that human contribution has always required, and that the entire economic system was built to provide. And the implications of that, for what money is, what an asset is, what a salary means, are not disruption in the conventional sense. They are questions about what the economic system is fundamentally for and what it is managing. I want to be precise about something here. The more I have studied AGI specifically, not just current AI tools, not just the agent systems, but the genuine frontier research and the genuine disagreements among the people closest to it, the more genuine uncertainty has replaced initial clarity. Because AGI is not a more capable version of the AI tools that clearly demonstrate leverage and productivity. It is a categorically different thing, and that difference matters significantly more than most commentary acknowledges or is comfortable acknowledging. Current AI, even the most capable agent systems deployed today, operates within the boundaries of its training and the reasoning patterns it developed from human-generated data. It is extraordinarily capable within those boundaries. AGI is a different category entirely. AGI, genuine artificial general intelligence, would reason in genuinely novel domains it has never encountered, would solve problems outside any pattern in its training, would potentially improve its own reasoning processes without requiring human direction to do so. The difference between a very capable pattern reasoning system and a genuinely general intelligence is the difference between the most powerful tool humanity has ever built and something that may not fit the category of tool at all. Demis Hassabis put this in specific terms at Google I/O 2026. He called it the foothills of the singularity, where AI starts to outpace human minds. He estimated the impact at 10 times the Industrial Revolution, unfolding in a decade. And he said, we have got to try and navigate this moment very carefully. Not someone dismissing the risk. The person who built AlphaFold, who solved protein structure prediction, one of the most significant scientific achievements in decades, saying we have to navigate this carefully. Jeffrey Hinton, speaking to CBC Radio in February 2026, said anyone who says there is no way AI leads to human extinction is simply not facing reality. These are not casual statements from peripheral figures in the field. These are the considered, documented positions of the people with the most direct knowledge of what is actually being built, and they disagree with each other about where it leads. Not performing uncertainty for cameras, actually uncertain, at the highest levels. So, where does this leave us? Four specific, documented vulnerabilities in the AI economy that the mainstream celebration is not examining with adequate depth or honesty. Training data degradation, where the pipelines producing the AI systems that economic and financial infrastructure depends on are being contaminated by the outputs of prior AI systems in ways that progressively degrade performance on the situations that matter most. Goal misalignment at scale, where AI systems optimizing for measurable proxies deployed across critical economic infrastructure produce systematic errors that propagate at machine speed through correlated decision-making, with no human checkpoint in the loop. Systemic financial risk, where concentration of AI infrastructure in a small number of providers creates correlated failure modes that existing regulatory frameworks were not designed to address at propagation speeds those frameworks were not built to manage. And the access divide, where the economic transformation AI is producing is concentrating in ways that may create structural demand problems for the global system as a whole, not just for the countries and populations being left behind by the transition. Now, here is the honest framework for thinking about all of this. And this is the part most commentary skips, because it does not have a clean conclusion, which is precisely why it is worth stating clearly. The technology is real. The documented risks are also real. These two facts do not cancel each other out. They are simultaneously true. And the honest position is precisely what the frontier research shows when you read it without an agenda. AI is evolving so rapidly, with companies and countries competing against each other in the race toward general intelligence, that even the short-term understanding is highly uncertain. The long-term understanding is even more uncertain, genuinely beyond the kind of confident prediction that most commentary offers. And anyone who tells you otherwise, anyone presenting this with the confidence of a settled question, is either not looking at the full picture or is telling you what you want to hear. The honest position is significantly less comfortable than either the optimist or the catastrophist framing. What the verified record shows is this: the transformation is real. The pace is accelerating. The documented risks are specific, not theoretical. And the regulatory frameworks designed to manage systemic risk were built for a different kind of economy than the one AI is currently building. The alignment question, whether the systems being built can be reliably directed toward human interests as their capabilities scale, is being worked on right now, incompletely, in a competitive environment that creates structural pressure against the careful, consensus-driven process it may actually require. And the alignment research is, by documented assessment of the leading AI safety organizations, significantly underfunded relative to the pace of capability development, an asymmetry that is not a theoretical concern, but the documented condition of the global AI development landscape right now. Three futures remain open. In the scenario where AGI arrives and remains genuinely aligned with human interests, delivering the productive capacity its optimist proponents envision, the economy undergoes the most profound structural transformation in human history. Not disruption of industries, transformation of the conditions that economies were built to manage. Scarcity, the fundamental condition that economics exists to address, becomes dramatically reduced as the productive capacity generating what humans need becomes effectively abundant. In the scenario where capability develops significantly, but alignment does not keep pace, the economic question becomes secondary to a different kind of question, the kind of question that subsumes all other questions. And in the middle scenario, significant disruption, neither extreme resolution, the documented research from the IMF, the OECD, and McKinsey describes a disruption profile unlike previous transitions in one specific documented characteristic. Previous transitions disrupted specific sectors sequentially, agriculture, then manufacturing, then retail and media, giving adjacent sectors time to observe and partially adapt before the disruption reached them directly. Advanced AI's disruption profile, based on documented institutional research, is significantly less sequential, because the capability being deployed is not sector-specific. Legal reasoning, financial analysis, medical decision support, research synthesis, strategic planning, software development, all simultaneously. The adaptation challenge this creates, retraining, institutional redesign, social safety net restructuring, would need to happen across sectors at the same time rather than sequentially. That is an adaptation problem with no clear historical precedent in documented economic history. And I want to close with something brief, because it captures something about the position we are in, as individuals trying to navigate a genuinely uncertain moment, that I think is worth sitting with carefully. The world is being reshaped. The honest answer is that nobody knows exactly how. But the people who understand the systems being reshaped, the monetary architecture, the training pipelines, the deployment risks, the access dynamics, are in a fundamentally different position than the people who do not. That is what the applied macroeconomics course was built for. Understanding the foundational architecture before AI makes it unrecognizable. The link is in the description, and the 4 books in the description each cover a different dimension of navigating this economy with clarity rather than noise. Since you stayed until the end of this video, the videos appearing on your screen right now go deeper into the structural mechanics of the global economy and the financial systems that AI is actively reshaping right now. If this video gave you a framework worth thinking about, a like and a subscription means more people who would find this useful actually get to see it. Thank you for watching.